Welcome to Keep the Line Moving, the podcast where leadership meets life and inspiration. Here we spotlight extraordinary leaders. We're diving deep into how they inspire, motivate, and lead with strategy and empathy to achieve the extraordinary. Here we go. Episode 114. The topic today, the competitive edge. According to our guest, Damon Lembi, and I agree with him, he's the CEO of a company called Learnit. He's been there 25 years. They specialize in keynotes, virtual and in-person workshops, and full organizational training. Back to that competitive edge. Damon and I talk about that there are 5 generations within our workplaces, and not just new employees or advanced ones. It's everyone wants an opportunity for growth, learning, and development. That is what Damon's company provides. And he sees through all these decades of watching companies, working with them, seeing them engage, that the ones that provide their employees with these opportunities, they have the competitive edge. Speaking of competing, Damon was a Division I college baseball player at Arizona State. He grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. Learnit is based there. He has a love of Bay Area sports, including he will tell us a story about a family friend, a gentleman you might recognize his name, Hall of Famer Joe DiMaggio. You have to hear this story. Damon's an author. He's written 2 books. We have so much to talk about. The conversation begins now with Damon Lembi. So Damon, let's have you do this real quick off the top. What does Learnit stand for? What is it, and what does it stand for?
So Chris, first of all, thanks for having me. It's an honor. And Learnit is a live learning platform. We've been around for 30 years. And customers turn to us when they're looking to upskill new managers. Let's say somebody gets promoted from an individual contributor to a new manager, and we all know it's a different skill set. So we help give them the tools and resources they need through live learning to become a great manager. Or let's say teams are struggling with communication. And so we design programs around helping organizations achieve either the outcomes they're looking for or some of the pain points that they deal with. And yeah, I've been at it for a long time, and I absolutely love it. Headquartered out here in the Bay Area, but now we're pretty much since COVID, a remote first company.
That's really interesting that you say you're remote first. Why is that, Damon? I understand the world changed during COVID, but you've stayed with it, right? What's the rationale and the strategy behind that? That's very interesting.
Well, when COVID first happened and we had to pivot to fully remote for our delivery, we were really concerned because a lot of our customers would say to us, how are we going to learn to have difficult conversations virtually, or learn self-awareness, or even Excel? But not very long after that, they realized that we weren't going back into the office. So they started doing these workshops virtually, and they found out that they were just as effective, and in some cases, even more effective. For 25, 28 years, we had 10,000 square feet of real estate in San Francisco, 10 or 12 classrooms, and it just didn't make sense to go back into the office anymore. Yeah, so now we've got about 75 employees. Everybody is remote. I've got a little office in Sausalito. I see people every once in a while, but that's pretty much how we work these days.
So Damon, we're going to get to the core of Learnit, the core of your beliefs and the wonderful work that you do. But let's go over here for a second and talk about the fact that you and I have so much in common. We're both from the Bay Area. We both played college baseball. But Damon, talk about the fact that, you have such a background that is so conducive to leadership and helping people from those baseball days. There's so many things going in the direction of you being exactly where you are, if I could say that.
Well, we almost weren't able to record because we've been talking for so much beforehand, and so we do have a lot in common: a love for sports, the Bay Area, a passion for learning and leadership. And so my background really is I was born and raised in the San Francisco Bay Area, big sports guy, local sports guy, baseball, football, basketball. I went all in on baseball. And it worked out for me. I was a high school All-American, and I had my first big decision to make my senior year. I was drafted by the Atlanta Braves in the 13th round, and I had a full ride to Pepperdine University. And it was really my first opportunity to learn about leadership. I went the Pepperdine route because of the coach, Chris. His name is Andy Lopez, a Hall of Fame baseball coach. And I bought into his vision. He had a crystal clear vision. He said, within 2 years, we're going to win the College World Series, and we're going to do it by doing this, this, and this. Pitching, defense, and core hitters in the middle of the lineup. And Damon, you're going to be part of that. And I was thinking to myself, and a lot of people were, hey, Pepperdine's a small 2,500 person school. How are they going to compete with Arizona State, LSU? Fast forward, I got hurt. I left Pepperdine, but Chris, the year I left, they won the College World Series.
Oh, geez.
And so anyways, to answer your question, I ended up playing at Arizona State, didn't get drafted again. And at 22, I had to figure out what's my identity. I was always a baseball player. We talked about this before. Will Clark was my idol growing up. I love George Brett, guys like Joe Montana. But fortunately for me, I came from this family that had a big real estate background and hotels, but I was pretty intimidated, and I didn't know if my skills would transfer from baseball into the business world. So I took a job as a receptionist at this computer training company called Learnit that my dad was just starting. And so I started there, and I've been here ever since. I've kind of worked my way up the ladder, taught classes, did sales, and for the last 25 years, I've been the CEO. And a lot of it has been because of the skills, which I like to call athletic education, I got playing sports, that has led me to be successful and always continuously learning, even 30 years later.
You bring up so many great points there. So it begs the question, and I don't like to alienate non-athletes, right, when I say this, but I played, like you, baseball and football growing up, and more baseball. I started to go year round and played a little bit in college, a couple years. That being said, the lessons, Damon, that you just said, an athletic, education, or however you phrased it, athletic leadership, what specifically as a baseball player, because there's so much failure in it. You hit 300, you're, making outs the other 7 times. That's just one element, but it's just such a complex game and a great teaching mechanism for, like you said, in the corporate world. So what were those things you extracted and took with you?
So the skills that I picked up from sports were discipline, collaboration, teamwork, and perseverance, right? I mean, you just hit on it. In baseball, if you get out 65% of the time, you're going to win the batting title and sign a contract like Juan Soto. I mean, there's so much failure that you have to deal with, and you just can't look at it as failure. You have to look at it as learning opportunities, and you have to be resilient. And one of the questions that people ask me all the time is, what are the top skills people need in 2025 and beyond in the workforce, especially with AI and technology? And what I like to say, and this is part of the athletic education, is learning agility, your ability to learn and continue to learn. And sometimes it means learn, unlearn, and learn again. So take, for example, I come up to the box, I strike out. I go back to the dugout. My hitting coach hopefully will give me some constructive feedback. I have to turn things around in the next 30, 40 minutes and make adjustments. And just like this rapid business world we're in today, being able to learn and relearn and take and receive feedback has been critical. And I owe most of it to what I learned playing sports and growing up.
Learning agility. I just love that. Okay, so back to Learnit. We know who you are as the CEO, and folks can hear your driving principles and what you stand for. So this is what I really was getting excited about talking to you today for a number of reasons. So you've, what is it, 2 million people you've helped over the course of your career, right? And the instructors and all the wonderful programs that you have. Who are your typical clients? Who's coming to you? Why are they coming to you? And that is so helpful for folks out there that want to engage perhaps with you. What are their pain points?
I would say our avatar, our target client, is an organization. It doesn't matter what industry they're in, but they're from 100 to 1,000 employees. Their leadership, which I think is critical, believes in investing in their team. And a lot of times these organizations, Chris, they don't have an internal learning and development department, right? So they don't have, 10 L&D people. So they bring Learnit in as their outsourced L&D team. And we work with them typically in the HR department or in business units, and we design programs around really the outcomes that they want to achieve. And it could be anything from, we're rolling out Office 365 and we need to upskill everybody on that, or again, we have a bunch of new leaders and they got to get better at coaching and doing one-on-ones, or their team's just frustrated because they can't hit their deadlines, right? So we do all of that and we try to be proactive about it. A lot of customers turn to us, though, when new customers turn to us when they go in and they do like a culture amp survey, and the feedback that they get from their organization is that they don't offer enough career development. And that's what's so great about, you want to say the younger generations are demanding career development, but there's an interesting study out there that shows all generations, one of the top things people want are opportunities for professional growth and development. So that's how we help organizations. Now, don't get me wrong. If somebody's got a 25-person company, absolutely we'll help them. Some of our largest clients that have been clients with us for a very long time are, enterprise companies who use us for specific things. And I'd also want to say some of my favorite clients are some of your past employers, the San Francisco Giants, and even the at the time the Oakland Raiders.
That's awesome. And I've been in your sessions. So Damon, let's look at this. So I'm going to share something with you because you love this kind of stuff, and I could tell. I woke up in the middle of the night last night thinking about why NFL teams don't win. But it has to do with culture, it has to do with coaching, and it has to do with your roster, obviously, and there's a combination of the three. I'm obsessed with leadership like you are. So my point is, I'm so fascinated with culture and why it's so important. So when you go to bed at night and you think about like we said, the pain points, and you just beautifully laid out your typical clients and all, what do you do when someone in learning and development that you're working with, right? And I know you're not on the front lines a lot, but sometimes perhaps you are. They just aren't getting it. They're not able to say, okay, here's why learning's important. Here's why you do have to have a strong culture. It's not just about getting the work done. What do you do when that's really not resonating with the high level leaders that you're working with?
That's a great question. And one thing I want to say is when I get out there and do talks on building a learning culture, or learn it all culture, I like to call it, is it has to start at the top. It has to start at the C level and the senior leaders. They have to get involved, and not just, investing and putting up money for it, but actually rolling up their sleeves and participating in learning. They need to model the behavior. And I think that goes for all types of leadership. You need to model the behavior that you want your culture to have. And so if organizations, well, typically, Chris, they're not working with us if they don't believe in investing in their people, right? They just think it's a waste of money or a waste of time, or they're afraid that they're going to invest in their people, or they look at it as an expense instead of an investment, and they're afraid people will leave, which is all the wrong attitude to have. And I think in today's world, if you're not going to be competitive if you're not investing in your team and giving them growth opportunities, both in formal training. But it doesn't end at formal training. You also have to carve out time for them to learn in the flow and allow people to make mistakes and learn from them as well. So to answer your question about how do we help organizations that don't want to invest in their team, they're typically not our clients.
Okay, so I know there's nothing typical because, as you said, you customize programs for folks, but you do have a core, way about approaching a 90-minute session. Take us through a 90-minute session for a typical company, and what is it like? How do you greet them? What are some of the planned activities that you have? Because that's what people want to know. They want to know, listen, because we all have been through things like this, some more successful than others. You've been around for 30 years. You're doing it right. Your client list is impressive. You're impressive. Your instructors, your website's beautiful. Your newsletter, your podcast, it's all top quality. So my assumption is, and I've been in it, but I want you to share it with folks. I walk in, what happens?
Well, first of all, I should put you on the sales team because you're more passionate about this stuff than everybody I know. I'm teasing, but thank you so much for all the nice compliments. Well, one thing I want to clarify is we try to do our best not to over customize training. We want to tailor it. We want to tweak it and tailor it for the customer's needs, because it's very important. Like if you're a sports team, you don't want to use examples from a pharmaceutical business, right? You want things to be relatable. But at the end of the day, we also have our own models, whether it's around feedback or listening or coaching, and those are transferable for different industries as you tweak it. So our sessions are typically 2 hours in length, and they cover everything from a workshop, from the sense of the instructor will go through a tool, then you have some self-reflection, then you go into breakout rooms and you go through an exercise, you come back and you report on it. And what I'd say too, Chris, is anybody who's listening to this who wants to experience our training, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'll give you a free class, and you can see it for yourself. And so yeah, and one of the things I think that's great, our Chief Learning Officer, Darren Bridget, we're constantly iterating on our training to make it better over time and tweaking the examples and the experience. What also is super important is, and I know that you can't walk into a 2-hour class on self-awareness and then turn around and you're amazing at it. You need to do more. And so we have follow-up. We're building an AI habit coach. We have post-class work, whatever we can do to help make things more sticky so that the learning experience doesn't end just in this 2-hour workshop.
I have the advantage of teaching, right, at NYU undergrads, and then at Montclair State here in New Jersey, graduate students. So I'm seeing all the perspectives of those about to and already in the workforce. So I'm getting like firsthand data and incredible feedback. And I always say I learn from the students as much as hopefully that I'm teaching them. And I've realized that age group, and any age group, if I'm working with NFL teams and other, you have to keep them moving. Like you have to keep them learning the agility, keeping it moving with energy. How important is that for your instructors to have that energy? Because it's all about a feeling. And here's my personal philosophy, which is learning is a feeling. Leadership is a feeling. And it's not just rah, 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 blah, blah, blah. It's engagement, right? I'm jumping through the screen here. And I'm sure you share that passion. Fair?
Oh, 100%. And what I'd like to add to what you said earlier is, yes, you absolutely, as a facilitator, you learn so much from your learners. We call them learners in the class. And I like to say as well is that the attendees, our learners, sometimes you learn as much as more or more from other individuals in the class who are sharing their experiences. And to go back what you're saying about keeping them moving, absolutely. You got to have some video. You have to have some tests that come up online, just simple, self-assessment tests that you could share back. Because again, at the end of the day, with attention spans the way they are these days, you can't just sit there with a boring slide deck and read from a slide deck and think you're going to have any engagement.
So, Damon, people ask me this all the time, and I'm sure they ask you this all the time, and it's on your LinkedIn and something that you talk about. But let's just flesh it out here because it's fun. It's interesting. Are leaders born or are they made?
I believe, and I'm curious to see what you think, I think that leaders aren't born or made, they're constantly in the making. Now, some people, Chris, are born with innate abilities, like they're great storytellers or they're very charismatic. But I wrote a book called The Learn It All Leader. And what I say in my book is, look, anybody could be a leader if you want to put in the work and the effort and the consistency to do so. So don't feel like if you weren't born with these special skills, you can learn, evolve, and grow. And for those out there who are born with these skills and they think they have it all figured out, I like to call them know-it-alls. That's not going to work out these days. And I know that with the rapid pace of change and how the world's evolving and 5 generations in the workforce, great leaders have to be adaptable. They have to be flexible. They have to be great listeners. And they also have to be very curious. And if you're all of those, you're going to be constantly learning, growing as a leader. So great leaders aren't born or made. They're constantly in the making.
You have to want to lead people, which means not boss them around. It's all the wonderful principles that you said. You have to be curious about them. You have to care about them. Anybody who's leading and they say they're self-proclaimed, I'm not a people person, that doesn't make sense. That's all that this is leading, is you have to be a people person. You have to be fascinated with the nuances of how they deal with adversity or failure or success and wanting to see how everybody fits together to make a great team. I think that that is really fun. All right, I'm going to read you something, and then I want you to react to it. Something you wrote. There's a quote on your website. Great leaders are great students, and the world is their classroom. Learning starts with curiosity. When you engage and wonder about why things are the way they are and how they could be better, you're able to spot opportunities that others might miss. That's that curiosity. So, Damon, who comes to mind that you've observed as a leader, either someone you've worked at Learnit, someone who's been a client, or someone in the world, the sports world, the leadership world, politics or business, that comes to mind that embodies that thought that you share on your website?
That's a great question. And there's probably a lot. I think let's go with Bill Walsh, okay? Because that's one of my favorite books. I think it's called The Score Will Take Care of Itself. And one thing about Bill Walsh was he was very innovative and always tried to find new ways to do things and look at things differently. When he took over the 49ers, they didn't have the greatest talent. They had, I think, Steve DeBerg at quarterback, and then they had a young guy by the name of Joe Montana, one of my idols. And he found a way to make it work within the system, or he shifted the system to make things work. Now, if he was a coach who said, this is the traditional way to do things, this is how we've always done them, my way or the highway, well, guess what? They would have never evolved and won all the Super Bowls they did. So I think Bill Walsh, in my lifetime, was one of the most innovative, creative, best leaders that I've ever been around.
I have that book right over there, and I talk about Bill Walsh all the time. You made a wonderful point that he didn't force his ways on folks. He was meticulous with constructing the way, even to the way people answered the telephone, what their dress code was. It wasn't like being militant about it. It was being buttoned up and having everyone on the same page.
But they
That's
did
a
things
great,
differently, right?
yes,
They did things
yes.
differently. And what I loved about that book, Chris, what you're hitting on is he was saying everybody's important, right? From the guys in the locker room putting out the towels to the announcers, everybody contributes to our success. And if everybody does what they're supposed to do and is accountable, the score will take care of itself. But you can't leave out Eddie DeBartolo, and even Carbon Policy, as far as what they were able to bring to the Bay Area for the 49ers.
I agree with you 1000%. And Eddie is beloved still today by all those ex 49ers. They adore him. And it wasn't just because of first class jets and, vacations to Hawaii, which were all part of it.
He
It
had their
was
back.
he cared about them, right?
Yeah.
He cared about them, and so we could go on. We are so fortunate to be Bay Area natives with the championships and the great culture that was established with these leaders, right? And how they valued people and won, Damon. They won too.
Beyond fortunate, I mean, look, we've been through the Giants, the Warriors, the Raiders, the 49ers. It's been a great several decades.
Right? And the A's of the early 70s winning 3 straight World Series. How did they do
Yep.
that? They had a culture of players that believed in something greater than themselves.
I think it goes back to, what you woke up thinking about, why some NFL teams don't win is you hit on it. I mean, I think everybody has to, the best teams collaborate, they work together, their synergies. You look at these teams that go out and get these big high price free agents and they put them into a culture that maybe isn't succinct, then guess what? They don't win, right? They might get more fans to the park, or more advertising dollars. But I think the very best teams out there, like the Giants, when they win all those World Series, they didn't necessarily have superstars. Yeah, sure, Buster Posey and Madison Baumgartner and everything, but they were a team. They worked together. They had each other's backs. I mean, that's to me, that's what great teams are. Bruce Bochy.
Exactly, Damon. And that's fun to talk about at this part of our conversation today. I love how you bring this up and extending this part of this thought process, which is those Giants teams. Pat Burrell was cut by Tampa. Cody Ross, right, was waived or whatever the complexities were from the Padres. The Giants pick him up, or the Marlins, wherever he was. He was discarded. And then he becomes a hero in the NLCS. And Pat Burrell hit some game-winning home runs. It was amazing to watch that in that 2010 and then 2012 and 2014. What was your vantage point? What did you think as that was happening down the street?
Well, one thing I want to point out is I think it's important for your listeners, like if things don't work out at one job, that doesn't mean you can't be great at something else. You just talked about all these guys who got cut and they didn't give up. They found their place on the Giants and they helped bring world championships. So it just goes to show you, and as a leader too, it means figuring out what people's strengths are and putting them in positions to be successful. My vantage point was it was awesome. I mean, I was lucky enough to go to a couple of the games, and there was just so much spirit and energy in the Bay Area during that time for the Giants. It was amazing.
So you brought up, let's go back to leadership here for a minute, like in the traditional sense, and then we'll get to all-star moments and let you rock and roll with your day. Some leaders do that, right? They will have a system and they'll see, so they'll make a hire to fit someone into a system, a perceived culture that has, this person will fit perfectly here, right? And it's a job description, but sometimes that's a little closed off, right? Because you don't know the potential for cross collaboration with other stakeholders if you're trying to pinpoint where someone would fit. Is that a fair statement to make, in your opinion?
It is a fair statement. And I want to, for new managers, especially out there, rule number 101 in management is if somebody's failing at a position, it doesn't mean move them to something else to keep, to try something else all the time. If they're not a good fit for your organization, then you got to, performance manage them up or out. Now, on the other hand, if you have somebody who's got a great talent, I'll tell a really quick story. There's this woman,
Sure.
Carly Lutz, and Carly joined Learnit several years ago, a couple years out of college, on our sales team, and she had all the values that we were looking for. She was open to change. She was a big learner. She worked hard. She had a great attitude. She was a team player, and she worked really hard at sales, and she hated it. I sat down with Carly, and I just got curious. I said, how are you doing? And she said, to be honest, I love Learnit. I love the culture, but I don't think sales is for me. So I might leave. I think, first of all, that's great that she felt comfortable enough to say that to me, right? I mean, she felt safe enough to say that. And because sometimes people would say that and that might be shown the door. But anyways, so I said, hey, so where do you think your strengths are? And why don't you come back with some ideas? And she came back with the idea to start an online community, which happened to be something that I was really passionate about, especially because this was right during when COVID was starting. So we created this online community out of nothing. I like to call it possibility spotting. We took somebody who had the right ability and aptitude and attitude that we wanted at Learnit, and we developed something. We set up a business plan and a budget for her, and she helped take us from 50,000 subscribers on our YouTube channel to now we're at 800,000. She's not with us anymore, but a lot of it had to deal with these Friday community events that we set up, Chris. During COVID, everybody was really looking for ways to stay engaged. And I think she's a tremendous success story in the sense of, she found something that she loved and it aligned with what we needed. And Carly doesn't work at Learnit anymore, but we're still good friends. But that's a situation where when you have great talent, find a place for them to work.
That's awesome.
Totally.
That's a perfect jumping off point to all-star moments with Damon Lembi. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
We will get to all-star moments in just a second. To grow as a leader, you must make intentional choices about how you want to show up for yourself and your team. Are you ready to grow your leadership? The Gargano Leadership Group offers expert coaching, consulting, and workshops rooted in our 4 leadership pillars: curiosity, alignment, optimism, and self-awareness. Leadership starts with forging authentic connections, communicating your values, leading with energy and enthusiasm, and truly understanding yourself. Visit garganoleadership.com to get started with us today. Back to the show. All right, here we go. I think I know one of the answers to my questions here. Here we go. First thought, best thought, rapid fire. Here we go. Best baseball player you've ever seen.
Barry Bonds.
Best baseball manager you've ever seen.
Bruce Bochy.
Best football coach ever.
Bill Walsh.
I see, that's the one I know. Best singular team you've ever seen that you said they have it all together. I see why they're winning.
I would go with the 49ers, their second championship. I can't remember what year it was.
The 84 team?
The 84 team.
Okay, got it. All right, here we go. The number one leadership challenge we face today.
Working across multiple generations.
Okay, how do you deal with adversity?
You accept it, you work within your constraints, and you leverage the resources you have, so you don't have to go at it on your own.
What gives you fuel?
My wife and kids.
Hiring people. You've done a lot of that in your time as CEO. What do you look for in the ideal candidate to join the team?
Passion for learning.
And lastly, describe yourself as a leader in one sentence.
I would say an authentic leader who doesn't take myself too seriously and loves to be surrounded with great people.
All right, and I have one bonus. You knew Joe DiMaggio, the Yankee Clipper, San Francisco native, Bay Area native, but lived in the city. What was he like?
Oh, he's a legend. And I got to, he came to our Christmas Eve party, as I told you. And when I was a high school senior, hotshot All-American, Joe D came with my dad to one of my games, Chris, and I was so nervous. I struck out twice and hit into a double play. And, but he was a great guy. I mean, he was much older, but just a legend to be around.
That's a great story. You were nervous. So yeah, and you probably didn't strike out very much, right?
Well, I struck out quite a bit. Well, not in high school, but you got to understand, this is high school baseball. There's like 15 people in the crowd, and one of them is Joe DiMaggio sitting right behind home plate. What's he doing at a high school baseball game?
Exactly. Damon, this has been great. Thank you so much. So this is wonderful.
Thanks for having me, Chris. I really enjoyed it.
And we thank Damon very much for being on the show. I have a few takeaways from today's conversation. Number one, Damon phrased it as athlete's perspective on leadership. What does that mean? He was a former college baseball player. We talked about that. So what did he learn, take to being the CEO of Learnit, and implement into his programs? Well, there are 4 qualities. 1, discipline. 2, collaboration. 3, teamwork. 4, perseverance. And in the sport of baseball, Damon and I talked about it, you can fail 7 out of 10 times and still get a gigantic contract. So think in terms of how we fail at work. Do we learn from it? And Damon talked about the fact that you could get up in the 3rd inning, strike out, and have 30 to 40 minutes before your next at bat to make an adjustment. Well, take that into the professional world. Make those adjustments. The way Damon said it, learn, unlearn, and then learn again. An agile mind, right? Learning agility is the way that he put it. And that helps all of us frame how we walk into our workplaces every day. There are 5 generations. And as Damon said, and I agree, it's not just the generation coming right out of school or those getting ready to retire. Everyone wants and needs, for that competitive edge, to have a place to grow. And lastly, Damon is the host of his own podcast called the Learn It All podcast. They release a few episodes a week. I was fortunate to be a guest a couple of weeks ago. Listen to Damon's podcast, again, called the Learn It All podcast. For those of you listening to this podcast, thank you very, very much. Have a great week. We'll see you next time on Keep the Line Moving. Thanks for tuning in to Keep the Line Moving. If you enjoyed this episode, give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and leave a review. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Most importantly, share this podcast with your friends, family, and coworkers. It means the world to us. If you have a guest recommendation, visit our website at garganoleadership.com, where you'll also find all our archived episodes. For our marketing coordinator and the producer of this podcast, Savin Narwhal, I'm Chris Gargano. Have a fantastic week, everybody.